What up? What up? We live. We live. Shout out to everyone out there. It's Seed Talk, stuff to make your seeds walk. We have a very, very special guest today, and we have a very, very special topic. I brought this person onto the show because they terrorize and bully me so much
Whoa.
online. And that, you know what? In all seriousness, that's the beauty of Seed Talk and what I do as an as an intellectual leader and learner in our community, man, is bring people onto the show that I meet out there in the in the stratosphere, in the internet stratosphere. And I brought her on here really as a form of intervention. I have a live intervention for her so she can work on being mean to people online. No, but in all seriousness, this is a sister that I wanted to bring onto the show. She goes by Peachy on Facebook. Check her out. But the reason why I wanted to bring her on here, because I've been trying to, I know my partner, Doug Rand, he's a More Science Temple brother. We've been wanting to have this conversation that includes the not out of Africa theory, which includes not calling yourself Black, which includes the Aboriginal movement. But she really does a good job on our page, in all seriousness, of educating people on the Gullah Geeche. And I just really want to talk about the importance of that and why, especially Black folks, but all people should know about the history of the Gullah Geeche. And you probably will start to understand why people say and do certain things in our community is because of this rich history that has been hidden from us. So why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are. You got your grandma glasses on and whatnot.
Stop playing with you.
You said grandma. You said I have to call you a grandma. You glammed up.
Glam mom. But
okay. All right. But
yeah, it's a pleasure being here. It really is to finally talk to you on Seed Talk. We Geechee people. And I say
hold on. You didn't even tell him where you from. You didn't tell him your name. You're usually gonna jump right into it with your fly ass New York voice. Come on, there's a story behind the voice. Seed Talk is rooted in the griot or the jolly. So we like to tell stories. Tell them where you from. Come on, and where you be.
I'm a Harlem World girl. 144th Street on the hill. They call it Sugar Hill.
Sugar Hill.
On the hill, I'm from the hill. And yeah, and my parents, grandparents, all Harlem people, however, by way of Low Country, South Carolina. They were
You're gonna get into that. You're gonna get into that more.
That they were part of the Great Migration. It came north to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York from South Carolina, which is where we wound up. And believe it or not, I wasn't born in New York. My father went to college at Howard University. And while he was a college student, he and my mother got together, and I came while they were in college. And
so they had a visit by the angel Gabriel.
That's it. And so I was born in DC. I'm original Washingtonian, believe it or not.
The other Washington.
Yes, the other Washington. The
right.
District. And so yes, I had the best of both worlds. DC, New York, because we were back and forth, because my grandparents were in New York. My dad was Washington DC college student, so we were doing the back and forth. So best of both worlds. And so that's where the accent comes from. Presently, I relocated to Virginia. I'm in the Tidewater area. And rich history.
Yeah. A lot of rich histories. All those places that you named. DC. I was over in DC for a little stint last summer. I spent 19 days on the road just studying. I went, and DC was one of the first places I went because I went to Anthony Broder's Egypt on the Potomac, or we should say Kemet on the Potomac. He does some excavations, sorry, pardon self, over in Egypt,
Oh,
formerly known as Kemet.
mhm.
And he's a chematologist, and so
Nice.
he leads these tours for the past it's been over a decade, might be 2 decades,
Mhm.
where he shows how they stole the knowledge from Kemet and put it in Washington D.C. That's why they have the Washington Monument. They call it an obelisk, but it's really a Tekken,
Yep.
which is really a phallic symbol, and just how it's all mapped out. It's actually mapped out like ancient Egypt. So,
Absolutely.
but,
Absolutely.
um,
Benjamin Banneker. He was a
absolutely.
force. Did all that.
Yeah, yeah. Benjamin, he was, yeah, man, he was a cold piece, man. He was a chess piece. That's what we say. You know what I'm saying? He was a chess piece. He was very powerful. Um,
And mhm.
talk about growing up in DC. What was that like? And then talk about growing up in
New York.
historic Harlem, New York.
Yeah. Um, let's see. I started school in Washington, D.C., private school. My dad was a graduate of Howard University, the Mecca, HBCU Mecca. He Omega Psi Phi Man, Alpha Chapter, and just living there, and I don't know, it was beautiful. I still have a huge DC family um, that I'm very close to. From my time there, we moved away when I was 8 years old. But we always came back because we were always back and forth to New York, DC, New York, DC. DC is amazing. DC always had a big, chocolate city community. And
Right.
so very much embedded in the DC community. I was Southeast DC, went to school right around the corner from Frederick Douglass House. Uh,
Hmm.
so just amazing. I'm still friends with the people I went to kindergarten with. I
Hmm.
keep my friends for a very long time with me on Facebook. And I went to private school. We lived in a community where I think in our apartment building, four of the families, we all went to the same private school. So our parents took turns um, doing uh, the commutes. Well, what is it when the parents do the back and forth with the kids to go into school? So I'm still friends with the same kids I went to kindergarten, first, second grade with. It's amazing.
Hmm.
And it was tight. It was a tight community. My mother was, I grew up Kojic. I don't know if you know that.
Church
Like,
of God in Christ, catching that Holy Ghost, and a lot of people don't understand that all that stuff
why
is rooted in voodoo, and it's
would
rooted in all that. Yeah. Hmm.
voodoo, baby?
Hmm.
Charles Mason, the bishop. I
Hmm.
grew up Charles Mason
Hmm.
in Church of God in Christ, Star Bethlehem Church of God in Christ, Washington, D.C., Bishop Harvey Lee Lewis Sr.
Yeah.
Yes, Bishop Harvey Lee Lewis Sr. And um married in that church the whole nine. That was my life in Washington D.C. And then my parents on the other end, my grandparents were in New York City. My father's whole side of the family is New York City.
Hmm.
So it was the back and forth. My grandparents were back and forth, DC, New York, DC, New York, New York, DC, DC, New York. And so um yeah, it's a beautiful life. Chocolate City was
Yeah. You know what I've couple observations and reflections on DC. I really love going there, and like most places in the United States, it's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. One of
traffic.
the would you say what now?
The traffic.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I have a story. I might not get. I mean, I missed a plane because of DC's traffic, and and me nerding out at all the Smithsonian museums, and I missed the plane, but it wasn't entirely all my fault. Um,
Uh-huh.
it was the traffic's fault also. But I've noticed that when I go there, it's like all eyes are on you without all eyes being on you. Like you just know that whole city is cameraed and mic'd up. You know,
Oh,
so
it's terrible. It has got terrible. The gentrification has allowed everything to be Big Brother is watching.
I know it is so crazy because you just know, like, for instance, like when I went to the White House, like I've been in the White House several times.
Mm,
Now, my mom gave me the opportunity, and that's why she was such a brilliant and intelligent and
mm,
wise mom. She
mhm,
took me to the White House, and when you could still just walk up there and schedule an appointment, you could actually just walk up in there and do
mhm.
a tour. So I was
Yep.
like 5 or 6. I remember going there. I
Mhm,
returned there for the second Million Man March, and
mhm.
I was standing in front, and I was like, it was very apparent that the gates outside of the White House were mic'd up. They
Yeah.
had to have been.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The technology that they have there. Another
Yeah.
observation is it's the DMV. So if you go too far, you might find yourself in Maryland or Virginia. It's like
Oh, it's
it's
very,
DC in itself so small. You know what I'm
very.
saying?
Is that's one of the whole reasons why traffic is just excruciating because federal government and then they live in the suburbs outside the outskirts, Silver Spring, Montgomery County, PG
Silver
County.
Springs, I'm very familiar with that. Silver Springs, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So Montgomery County, PG County, all of that, and they come to work in the district, and that's where you get all the bottlenecking, and it's horrible, absolutely
Yeah.
horrible. I
So
would love
you talk about PG County, you talking about Prince George County.
for Prince
Yeah,
George, the richest
I know one
black,
time,
the
yes, the
richest
biggest black. Yeah, I heard that it
black,
has the biggest black middle class in the whole United States.
PG County.
Yeah, yeah,
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It has its ups, its downs, but they're very progressive and beautiful, and people are really living their best life. Us, or you were really doing it, and I love it. I love it. I've quite a number of friends who live in Prince George County
right.
quite well.
What's
Lovely too.
what was it like living in historic, you know what I'm saying, Harlem, New York, with so much history? Shout out to Harlem. Shout out to the School of Allah, you know what I'm saying, out there on 125th. You know what I'm saying? What was it like growing up in Harlem?
You know what's crazy? I love Harlem. My during my I don't want to say my best days. I was a teenager. You ran the streets. You didn't really know what you were really living in while you were living in it, because I grew up in the era of my Adidas, the 80s, when rap was just coming of age. And so those were the best days when Dougie Fresh and that whole Salt and Pepper. Like, I lived on Sugar Hill, so everything was happening. This was before rap really took off. I want to say nationally, and we were still getting it in the parks. We had what was called jams in the park, where
Yeah.
anybody could just come and pull the turntables out, and you get in, anybody that's rapping and doing a thing, MCing, as they would say,
Mhm.
right there in the park, and just it'd be an all-nighter. And
Now
that's
you grew up during a time where Harlem really wasn't on the map back in the day for hip hop. It was really the Bronx and the
what?
Queens. They had
Are you
their
kidding
own
me?
thing.
Nah, we ain't going. No, sir. No, sir. First of all, let me just say this.
Let's just go to second of all, because you know it started in the Bronx. I mean, that's the history. Like,
Well,
Harlem,
that's
who
what
was the
that,
first one to really on the scene
we
for
fighting.
Harlem? Put
Gonna
Harlem
fight
on the map.
that, because first of all, you could walk across the street and be in the Bronx from Harlem.
Okay, okay,
So we gonna fight that. I mean, everybody says, "Ah, nah, it started here, it started there." Queensbridge try to take. Everybody got,
yeah. Curtis Blow. He was from Harlem.
yeah, yeah.
Dougie Fresh was from Harlem. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it's like, yeah. I guess. I wasn't there. So, but we always hear the infamous story about the Bronx versus,
Yeah.
in all seriousness, the Bronx versus Queens, with
Mm-hmm.
KRS-One coming at MC Shan and those guys. You know what
Right. Yeah,
I mean?
BDC and all of that just coming in, and but it was always there, and
Yeah.
so we don't know when it took off initiate because it was always there. I remember, one minute, us doing block parties, and then the next thing I knew, it just transitioned without you knowing it was transitioning into, the rap era. It was just always there. It was always present because you would just go in the park, and at any time somebody is MCing, is rapping, is doing whatever, and then the speakers are coming out, and
Mhm.
so you really don't know where it got started because it was just always there. It was just
Yeah,
where I grew up.
that's fair. That's fair.
Where I grew up
Yeah,
on the hill, um, I grew up on a what they call a historic block called Hamilton Terrace. You If you look now, they're calling it Hamilton Heights now. They don't even call it Sugar Hill anymore.
yeah. They do that. They do that to black neighborhoods all over the country when they gentrify. I'm like, we
Yeah.
have a historic area called the Central District. And
Hmm.
that's where Jimi Hendrix went to school at Garfield. Quincy Jones was a transplant from Chicago. We claim him too. Ray Charles spent some time in the CD.
I know.
Bruce Lee. Oh, we're claiming Ray. We're claiming Ray and
You ain't claiming, right? You can't
yeah,
claim.
we are. I mean, we claiming him. We claiming Ray. I say it as a joke. We're really not claiming Ray, but he was. But we do claim Quincy though. We really do because he went to high school here.
I know.
Um, but
Chicago got something to say about that, though.
I'm sure they do. Yeah, that's fine. Brown, I know Bronzeville got something to say. Bronzeville is beautiful. They can, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But what I was gonna say was it's called the Central District, but if you go to a certain section, they've
Hmm.
renamed it Squire Park. And the people who really know about the Central District or the Colored District be like, there ain't no such thing as no dang, Squire Park and whatnot.
Right.
So it's just interesting. I mean, like Harlem's one of those places
Hmm.
where, like well, New York in itself is one of those places where Run DMC was always talking about Queens.
Hmm.
You thought that both of them were for Queens, but you know what I'm saying? One of them was from Harlem. You know what I'm saying? So, what I loved about hip hop is I learned about places, all the five boroughs before I even got there
Hmm.
physically from listening to hip hop music.
Yeah.
So, and I also learned a lot about history
Yeah.
from hip hop music and
Mm.
whatnot.
Yeah.
And then every now and again, you would see like someone in hip hop music wearing like like um what they would consider Native American headdresses
Oh,
and things
absolutely.
of that nature, wearing moccasins and things of that nature. I think even African Bambaataa might have had a couple outfits when he was dressed up like that. I think that's a good segue to go into
Grandmaster Flash. Don't forget them. They
yeah.
are a
Yeah,
lot
why were they wearing a lot of what would be considered, you know,
because
uh,
they knew that.
Native American or Aboriginal? Like, this is a good segue to go into, and they're also wearing a lot of, African
Mhm.
inspired patterns or just straight up African patterns, a lot of
There
indigenous
were, there
stuff.
were, there were.
So, talk about that.
Mhm.
Like, what's the relationship with like the Gullah Geechee, Aboriginal movement, Native American movement, African movement, and hip hop growing up in the birthplace?
Mhm. Well, just like anywhere you go, you have Chinatown, right? You have where there are certain segments of population who stick together in one region and they have their Chinatown. Well, it was the same with us. When we were migrating up, we all would bring each other up. And so there were whole blocks of Geechee people who just one block you knew everybody was from Johns Island. You knew, you go around the corner and everybody was from Wamala Island. And then you go over to another area and it's people that were from Jamaica, where all the Jamaicans came together in one spot. And so we had districts like that. I don't want to call them districts. It was just blocks. In New York, we just call them blocks. We had
Mhm.
blocks where, where they knew they were Geechee. All the Geechee was over there. And everybody did the same thing. Everybody looked out for it was our communities. They were close knit and we kind of stuck together. We were very much inter, twined and Everybody knew everybody. I never, like, they didn't explain to you um, who everybody was. You just knew they knew them from home. Like my grandmother in the building she lived in, everybody in that building, in the 70s, the building that they lived on 149th Street on 7th Avenue, um, everyone in that building, in like within 3 or 4 buildings, they were all from Johns Island. And I
Mhm.
didn't find that out until later. I just knew they all had known each other for years, but I didn't know that they were all from Johns Island, but they all were from Low Country. And so what they would do is they communicated, and when someone was ready to come up from the island, migrate up, they would rent apartments for each other and, pull everybody up and form communities. Everyone stayed together.
Okay, so let me catch the viewers up real quick because you said a lot, and it's a lot of times a person like you're so knowledgeable and informed by it. I think like I don't think you understand. People don't understand what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? The
Mhm.
Gullah Geeche. So what I hear you saying is like when I ask you about how hip hop, you know what I'm saying, like um you know, shared some, is associated with Gullah Geechee and the Aboriginal movement and stuff like that. You're basically saying they migrated from these other parts of the United States, from the South,
Mhm.
and these people who became hip hop pioneers were
Mhm.
seeing these customs, seeing these clothes, these cultures, this way of life, and it
Mhm.
just naturally came out in the art form.
Right.
So that's why you see people like Malachi York with the Nuwabians. He'll be wearing headdresses or something like
Mhm.
that, or like I said, African Bambaataa.
Mhm.
And he'll be wearing like an ankh, or he'll be wearing all kinds of different headdresses. Or you said another person. You said Grandmaster Flash,
Mhm.
all things that they saw, like, it's kind of like, brothers and sisters, once they get into hip hop, they want, for a long time, they wanted to wear that cross, that crucifix. It's because
Right.
so many of our people grew up with the Bible. We grew up with the creation story of Jesus, a white Jesus, if any, and church. So we incorporate that.
Mhm.
So that being said, what is Gullah Geechee?
What is it? Um, well, we are those who were on the low country of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Some parts of North Carolina as well, those islands who are on the outskirts of the mainland. And we lived isolated on those islands that are all up and down the coast from, I guess, North Carolina all the way to Florida. And we were isolated out there, separate from the mainland. There were no bridges that connected those islands to whatever the mainland was. You have, and I'm going to use South Carolina as an example. The mainland was Charleston. Those were major ports. And so, because we were out on John's Island, James Island, Kiwa Island, St. Helena's Island, Wamala Island, there were no bridges that connected them. So we had their own way of life in isolation on those islands. They had plantations that they had stolen the original people, Aboriginal people, from the land of those islands off and placed them on the plantations. There, it was a major port as well.
Wait, hold on, slow down. So you're saying these people were already here in America pre-colonialism, pre the transatlantic slave trade, or AKA the African Maafa or Holocaust. They were
Yes,
already here.
they were already here. We were already here. And so they would steal the people from the land, place them on plantations. Because Charleston was a major port, they were also bringing in some African people. Together, the Aboriginal and the African combined on those plantations, and they called everybody African American. Everybody was not from Africa. However, the label was given, you're African, you're black, you're colored, you're Negro. They even reclassified you on documentations. We can go further with that, with the paper genocide of all of that. However, everybody was not an African. So together they created languages together because there were Aboriginal languages combined with the people who were brought in from Africa that created the Gullah language. So the language that they speak are is Gullah. It's a combination of Aboriginal words, some African terminology, and English.
Kind
A,
of like patois.
say it again. A form of patois.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Creole
Mm-hmm.
language, and it it is a code language as well. They used it for many reasons, and that was, of course, so that the colonizer, what we call in Gullah the Bukra could not understand what was being said, and so Bukra is who the white man or the plantation owners, because many Gullah people were free people of color on those islands. Many were never
Enslaved.
enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
Many were never ever enslaved. My great grandfather, great third great grandfather, was not an enslaved person, and so to call him African, because if you're not enslaved, if you're a free person of color, you wouldn't be an African person who just came here and was free. So you would have to know that they're off the land, and so and that's on census. Like you can go back and look at things like this on census in early 1800s before emancipation even happened. That many of our people were free people of color on those islands,
Right.
and so that language came out of the free people of color, some of the imported people from Africa combining words and creating their own language that they spoke with one another on those islands as they um made, tended rice crops, indigo crops, and tobacco crops. Now understand, a lot of people aren't familiar with the low country islands. Those islands are rural, and because it's swampland, white people didn't go there. White that was people of color. They were Aboriginal people and some Africans who were out there tending the rice fields, and white people didn't go there because those lands are infested. And I'm talking, you have to know the terrain to live there.
Right, right. That's why they had a lot of maroon colonies out in there. They
Mhm,
go out in there and escape, and that's what I want to really explain to people. So we go out to get deep into the weeds and the grass and stuff now, because a lot of people want to think it's a one-stop shop. When we talk about people that look like me and you, like even between you and I,
mhm,
there are some phenotypical traits that are different. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, even though you're darker than me,
mhm,
you know what I'm saying? I still have a reddish undertone, you know what I'm saying? And people like to say, oh, what do you mix with? And
mhm,
they love the one-stop shop theory. And for a lot of people, like we talked about before I got on screen, I make it easy for people um,
mhm,
because black is the foundation. But for legal reasons, that might not be the term that you want to say.
mhm,
If you want some kind of rights to ownership of the land, because it doesn't say that in the paperwork. And
mhm,
something that was very powerful. You
mhm,
said paper genocide. And we know that there are even white folks through the Dawes Act and other forms of clerical work that have, claimed the term of Native American.
yeah,
Keep using a term that's Aboriginal, which is different. What is the difference between
very different.
Native American and Aboriginal? Break that down. Try to keep it as concise, because
Sure.
you want to kind of keep people moving, because this is kind of hard to follow.
Yes.
Because I really want to encourage people to chill with that one stop shop theory that a lot of people have, and thinking
Mm,
that it's not as layered as it is. But
right.
what's the difference between Native American and Aboriginal?
Okay. Well, you know that the term native just means you were born there. I could say I'm a native New Yorker. because I was born in, I could say I'm a native Washingtonian because I was born in Washington. Okay. That only means you're born there. Aboriginal means that you are the original people of a land.
Mhm,
Very different from native. To be born somewhere doesn't mean that you're aboriginal to somewhere.
mhm,
And so the people that coin the phrase or call themselves Native American, they are not aboriginal to this land. They are they immigrated from Asia. The people
mhm,
who are aboriginal to all lands are deep melanated people who
mhm.
um, have always been on the land. That's the difference between an aboriginal and a native. An aboriginal didn't migrate. An aboriginal is the first people of a land.
So are you talking about immigrator? Are you talking about the land bridge theory, the Bering Strait that the Asians came over from there? So,
Yes.
and this is the one thing I also want to, talk to people about.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why in my scholarship, you see all the books. This is not just for props. I mean, I really get busy. I really read these books. And one of the things you're gonna you're gonna come into the you're gonna have the difficulties when you read one book, it's gonna say something different than another book.
Right.
And but that is the beauty
Mm-hmm.
of a book, is because it has references in the back.
Right.
So sometimes, and I'm not even gonna lie, there are some black scholars that entertain, what I'm saying, and maintain revisionist history. They're just quoting someone else who may got it wrong, what
Yeah.
I'm saying, are not absolutely correct. The
Mm-hmm.
point I'm trying to make is read and read and read and be a scholar, but understand that scholarship always means like things can be modified and there's more than one way to look at things.
Right. Right.
Just like you could call me, saying, like my grandmother used to always say, I'm not black, I'm Indian.
Mm-hmm.
Some people I look Native American. To other people, I look Aboriginal. To other people, I look African. To other people, I look African American. You know what I'm saying?
But what is to look Native American?
Right,
That.
right, 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 right. And and
Mhm.
and and, and in the social stratum that we live in, I'm not going to ignore the fact that that's we're dealing with. We
Yes.
know that race didn't exist pre-colonialism, that it was just a way. We were more tribal, we were more nation people.
Right.
And that's the reason why a lot of people that come from places in South and Central America who we would consider Afro Latino, they don't completely embrace that term because for them it's a national thing. No, I'm Latino. I,
Which I
you know,
which I have difficulty with because
right,
Latino is a European term. Latin America means Europe. It's
right,
I,
right. These are the names that were assigned to places that they conquered.
right.
You know what I'm saying? And they
And,
colonized.
and
You
that's
know,
they are, right.
a lot of people don't understand like
Yeah.
Latin America, what I'm saying, it's just where they went and they placed their flag and say
And
we claim
they,
a group of people. The Caribbean can go all the way down to Cancun and all the way back down over to Jamaica, you know what I'm saying, to Puerto Rico, to wherever. So it's
mhm.
important that we study this.
You know
So
what you
go
know
ahead, go ahead.
to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You know what's crazy? Just recently I was doing research and I was able to find articles of Mayans, original Mayan people who had been taken from the land, the Yucatan, and taken to Cuba as servants. I found these articles in the Yucatan Times, and they had the pictures of these people. This was the late 1800s. They had the actual photographs of the Mayans who were stolen from the Yucatan, and they looked just like me.
Yeah, I mean, I get into this with a lot of people, and it really bugs me when people just want to be right and they don't want to look at it a couple different ways because it's really hard to prove that you're exactly right to like the T. Like the point I'm trying to make is like the Olmec, like the Olmec people. Like that's a perfect example. They'd be like, well, those weren't Africans, those were da 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 da, and this, that, and the third. I'm like, we get so centered on Africa, and I want to get to that question of are we African, that we forget that we were all over the world. You know what I'm saying? And then I talk to people and be like, well, Columbus said in his journal that the people, the Arawaks or the Tainos,
Mm-hmm.
they talked to him and they said that they were people that came from a distant land over on boats that, and they had gold. And then there's plants that are there that you can't find native to that land, that they came from some other place.
Yeah.
They'll tell me, well, you can't believe Columbus. They never came over on the slave ships anyways. And I know you have, we're going to get in that too. But that's one thing about being a traveling scholar and actually being, I've actually been to the slave forts where they say they put them on the boats.
Mm-hmm.
But I always ask that question when they start putting a picture of, they weren't there. And I always ask them, are those pictures of people pre or post colonialism?
Right.
Because a lot of times you're not going to see people with nappy hair like me, with noses, eyes like me, that are considered to be Native Americans. And that includes the Caribbean, and that also includes Central and South America. Also, those are part of the Americas too, depending on, who you ask. I mean, they say Amerigo Vespucci discovered America, and this dude never came here. So it's like they got you all mixed up. So talk about the slave ships and how you see it. You're saying there's some people who go as far as say we didn't come over here at all. You said maybe not so much. I'm a person that says it doesn't matter about the numbers. What do you think about us coming over on slave ships, about that whole theory?
Oh, it definitely happened. It just didn't happen in the numbers that they brag of. There were not 12 million people who came from Africa to this land. What it was is 12 million people was stolen from the land and placed on plantations, and called Africans. There were a few thousand that were taken and bought, purchased, and brought over on ships. But the numbers that Europeans brag were brought over never happened. That never happened. Um, I do not dispute that there were Africans brought here. But believe it or not, there were
Did you say more?
more American Aboriginal people who were stolen from this land and taken there and taken to South America, to Brazil, taken to other parts of Europe and enslaved, that were literally stolen from this land and called African and put on plantations in the Caribbean, um, sugar plantations in the Bahamas and Barbados and the Antilles and Jamaica and all of these various places. The Taino people were stolen off the land and put on plantations. You look at you can literally look at the difference in what Haitians look like versus what the DR Dominicans look like, and see that the Haitians are the original Taino people from the land. And know that the French, who tried to colonize Haiti, brought Natchez Indians from Louisiana to that land along with the Taino people, and that's who Haitian people are. But because those people rose up against the French, slavery didn't last long there. That is why you see the original people of the land look the way, the Haitians have a distinct look to them.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Very distinct look,
Mhm.
and so you can see that they are people who are unlike, phenotypically unlike, any look from people that look like in DR, who look anything like we do here in the in the States. They don't look African. They look aboriginal to their land. That is who they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that. I mean, once you get into your scholarship and you get deep into the books, you
Mhm.
start traveling like I was telling you off screen, like when you actually go to the museums, you'll understand the beauty and the importance of doing that because you can actually see stuff that
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to read in the book.
Right.
You're going to be able to see stuff that's not going to be um, the discovery or the resolution of a Google search because the Google search is based on where you live and they can give you certain information based on where you live. And they also can put a filter on it too. If
Mhm.
you're using Google searching for everything,
Mhm.
then they got you already. You have to use different search engines.
Yes.
What I found out is that a lot of stuff was going on. They were moving people all around. There were different people moved from this, that, and the other. There was all kinds of the modifying and the manipulation of gene pools that
Mhm.
went on for people just to look, different ways. And
Mhm.
their whole objective, though, as people from
Mhm.
Europe, were to cause division, though, and run around, and they have a totally different relationship. And I tell this to people all the time,
Mhm.
and they think that I'm on some, I'm saying reverse, racism or reverse eugenics or something, but they just have a different relationship with the earth and the sun and water and nature in general. It's just different. I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's superior. I'm not saying it's
Right.
inferior. I'll let you choose that. But if once you start saying that everyone started off in Africa, and but there's also theories against that too. Like, but there's also theories that this whole planet looked a certain way. But even if you're saying the out of Africa theory that everyone came out of Africa and the further you went, the colder and colder it got, the phenotypical traits became different. People became hairier, they became lighter, the hair became thinned out, you know what I'm saying, as a form of protective covering for their bodies so they could stay warm. In the science world, we call that a mutation. And we are dealing with mutations. And like I raised my hand in biology class at the University of Washington, they started calling me a troublemaker. I was just asking really good questions, and we were doing the section um, on albinism,
Mhm.
and I was just like, "Yeah, go ahead, man, go ahead, logic, yeah, okay." Depressingly, so you're trying to say white folks are albinos?
Yeah.
And he says, technically, you can say that.
Yeah.
Yes, you can say that. And then you start studying the pineal gland, and you start talking about people's pineal glands being calcified, and we start talking about the relationship between your ability to be a receptor of melanin and what impact that has on your body when it comes to mood arousal, when it comes to your immune system, when it comes to your longevity on the planet Earth. You start to say, we're animals. The and they're just a different kind of animal.
Mhm.
And you start to understand why they were taking us all over in the boats, and then they had all what they call miscegenation laws. Like, why can't we breed with you guys? Why
Mhm.
can't we? Why was Hitler saying we need to preserve the pure white, you know what I'm saying, Aryan race? Because they knew mating with us means no longer. So it makes sense, and I'm gonna let you speak because I know you got a lot to say. It
I'm,
makes it
mhm.
makes sense that they came up with racism, and a branch of racism is colorism, and that we're constantly bombarded with the lighter, pale, melanin deficient versions of who we are. I've been saying this about gypsies. We've been seeing it a lot about with this whole thing with Egyptians. They're saying they're like saying that they want to you know start criminalizing and weaponizing people who present Egyptians as black Africans. Like, since when did Egypt move? I mean, it's like it's in Africa. We get the same thing with the Jews, and we also get the same thing with Native Americans. You know what I'm saying? In all these tribes, and I'd be like, the simple thing with like Native Americans, I'd be like, these like, for instance, my family, my great grandfather. I don't know how many greats it is, but it's more than two or three. It's more than three, right?
Mhm.
They call, my family likes to candy coat things. I'm like, that's a slave owner. Oh no, he was Native American. He was a plantation manager. I said, I'd be damned. I said, these guys are funny, man. But my point I'm trying to make is, was he a Native American according to something that was Dawes Act adjacent? Because the colonizers and the enslavers, they got reparations. They also were $5 Indians too. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of stuff was going on when we talk about who is what and who is who and all that. It's not as simple as just throwing black and white and mulatto and Creole and Aboriginal this and all that. Just throwing Native American, throwing African American, colored, Negrito. Like we can, it's not as easy as that. But my thing is this: why is that the reason why? Because they were shipping us all over. Why, what I'm saying? We see people in America who are Aboriginal or Native American doing things that Africans did.
When you say doing things that Africans did, such as
Let me
enslavement.
give you an example. We go back to our start of our conversation. We talk about hip hop, right? We know that breakdancing, if you do it, is capoeira. We know that.
Right.
We know that now.
Right.
We know that the enslaved people in Brazil were doing capoeira, and they had to hide it in the form of a dance because it was considered a martial art. That ended up becoming breakdancing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
well, it became breakdancing over here, but it was still
right,
there.
right.
It's still that it's still what it is. It just evolves, just like everything else. Just there's, evolves, but it's still in its form there, and still in its form in Alcabulon. It's still in its form. Everything has its origin. Everything has an origin. You
Like,
know.
how do we navigate this though?
Mhm.
I'm gonna call you Peachy. How do we navigate this, Peachy? Because like even when you use the words Alkebalon, or we use the word Pangea, or we use the word Turtle Island, like there's for every theory of what it's called, there's another theory of it's called something else. Someone would argue and say it wasn't called Alkebalon. It wasn't. Some people would call Africa, Asia. They said for a long time that whole area was called Asia. So like how do we know what to even say?
Well, those who are the Aboriginal people of that land can tell you what their land was, and those there say that their land was called Alkebulon, Ethiopia. Ethiop, Alkebulon. So you have to go with that. People know
Yeah.
their territory. If you're origin, if you're original from a place, they know where they know the origins of where they're from. Here, the origins of this land is Amaru. It did not come from an Amerigo Vespucci.
Mhm.
He actually changed his name when he got here, once learning that this was called Amaruka, which is land of the plumed serpent. It has its meaning. Um, Tupac was named his,
Yeah, middle name. Yeah, Tupac Amaru,
and
Yeah.
it's because that was the name of the land. Turtle Island is what Siberian, the Native Americans, termed the land. But before they came here, it was Amaruka, land of the plumed serpent, and that's where the name America comes from. The Amerigo Vespucci. First of all, if you look at how Europeans stuck their flag in lands and named things, it was never after a
They,
first.
they stuck something else to the
Yeah, they did. They did a whole lot of that. That's why we look
lot of
for.
sticking. Yeah, they stuck
But
swords and other.
in addition to that, when they claimed the place and named it, they certainly didn't name it after their first names. So it would then in that it wouldn't be called Columbia, or whatever after Christopher Columbus, it'd be called Land or something. Nobody named their countries that they conti- claimed discovery of after a first name. They didn't do that. And so I don't know. They did cities, like that, but they didn't name whole country. And his name was something like uh Roberto before he came to the country, before
Right.
his travels, and then he changed his name to Amerigo. And so after he did the voyage. And so you already know they propagandize everything to fit a narrative. And so that's how that came about. When you own the media, you own the narrative to any and everything. And who owned the media? Media being everything, the books, the radio, the TV. So you own the media, you own the narrative that goes with it, that comes from it. And
That's
so,
why one of the first things they did when they came into our civilizations or our nations, they killed the orators, or they killed the griots or the jollies, because we had an oral tradition. And they raided, they plundered, and they burned the libraries in Egypt. They did, I'm sure they destroyed Timbuktu, because it ain't there no more, as far as I know, in its wholeness. So everywhere they went, where we had our history preserved, so we can figure it out, they plundered it, they stole it, or they burned it down. I think they didn't steal. I mean, I don't think they burned everything. I think they actually took the books, and
absolutely.
I think they actually, a lot of the books is what goes into what you see, like the Vatican and their fraternal orders, or what they call their secret societies, and their masons, and speculative and operative masons. That's what they use, and they know the truth, and that's the reason why they're able to, create, like you said, create this propaganda, because they didn't destroy everything. That's one of the powerful things I saw going to the Louvre. That was just a big garage of stolen property, is what it
well
was.
understanding like what's happening now, the silencing of education, and saying that certain books can't be read, and we're taking out this. That's no different than burning a library. What's the difference? That's their new version of what they've always done. That's a age old playbook page from colonization. It's no different than how they've always um, colonized the place in order to place their flag. And once they made it illegal for us to read, now they can't make it illegal, so just take out the books. Well, before it was illegal to read, it was just burn the book. So it's just a new version of the old. There's no change. The colonizers are still the same. The method is just evolving. It's not. It's the same. It's the same thing, just done different.
We got about 7 more minutes to go. It's two more, and I'm gonna call them theories for the
Hmm.
sake of scholarship. I'm not even trying to be funny or anything. I like to just call them theories, because I always encourage people to do their homework and check it out. There's two theories of your research that you've done that I want to explore. The one is that you said that the Native Americans that we the people that we call Native Americans that are on the reservations and things of that nature, um, um, you said they were brought here by the Spanish from the Philippines based on your scholarship. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure, there were many migrations of Asians, but there was one um, a migration where there was a Pacific slave trade. Just like there was an Atlantic slave trade, there was a Pacific slave trade, and the conquistadors brought multitudes of Filipinos, as well as
You
Chinese.
did not do that. She said Philippines. No,
Filipino
go ahead.
No.
I'm just messing with you.
uh, from the Philippines,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Mongolians, Chinese, and brought them to Mexico, to California. These were the regions that Spain or the Spanish still um, were colonizing, and South America. That is why you see the people that they claim to be native. When you mix a Asian person with the Spanish, you're gonna get what looks like a Native American. That's what they are, and they were termed coolies and chinos, and they became what we see as the natives. But it became the white tool, the white man, the colonizer's tool to propagandize that phenotype look through cowboys and Indians, through TV. That was their marketing tool to program that visual of what a native is supposed to look like, or what the native of the land, the aboriginal of the land is supposed to look like, came from westerns. That it wasn't just entertainment. They were programming, visually programming
That's why I
people.
call it TV programming.
And that's what they were doing. They were programming the psyche, through visuals, to believe that that is what a Native Americans, and half of those people, by the way, who were playing natives were white people in makeup, and
Right.
and they were programming people to believe that that is the look of a Native American. But but your them lion eyes that we were looking, just was the tool of the colonizer to make a whole world believe that the natives looked like the long haired, phenotypical, Asian eyed, black, long with reddish toned, pale skin was what the aboriginal of the land, when that was just a colonizer tool to indoctrinate,
Yeah.
thought through television. And they didn't they they used a whole lot of methods to make you believe, but there were still way too many tribes who were still practicing and still together, um, in small pockets of America, who were looking just like you and me, and knew. So long you would hear people say, I'm part Indian, but we would always dismiss that. Girl, you ain't Cherokee, stuff like that. But those were oral traditions that were actually had been passed down, but they wouldn't allow a lot of Black people, because you can go into, like, I'm gonna say, for instance, you can just look up the oldest town, Black town in Virginia. In this region right here where I live are the Powhatan Indians. Okay, the Powhatan is Pocahontas tribe. Pocahontas looked like me. Like her father, King uh Chief Powhatan, looked like you. The Powhatans are still in this region. They just received some of their land back. They're called Rappahannock Indians. You look at the old law Loving versus Virginia, where they called the Black woman who married the first white man in the state of Virginia, Mildred Loving. She was a Chickahominy Indian. She wasn't a Black woman. Chickahominy, Rappahannock, these are Indians in this region who are all under the Powhatan Nation. Powhatan Nation is who Pocahontas, who John Smith came and married and took off to. Yeah, these were the Indians of this region. They look like you and me. They just received a huge land return not too long ago, um, getting their land back, because there was a man named Walter Plecker who did paper genocide with them. and went in. He worked for Vital Records in the early 1900s, and he was literally altering their tribal affiliation on paper. Anything that looked like you and me and on documentation had Indian, Rappahannock, Chickahominy, Pamunkey. These are some of the tribes in this region that had what are some other Pomoni that were um, he altered to colored on their documents, colored, so that they could no longer claim Indian or Aboriginal status. And so that was corrected recently. And
Mm,
those people, they had continued to practice their custom. They knew who they were. They just weren't allowed to say it because
right,
it was illegal in the state of
right.
Virginia.
What a lot of people don't understand is that, prior to colonialism and this whole race things, like we were tribes, we were nations,
We're
we went
just
by that. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
you have to understand that, like, the white boy or melanin deficient people, Europeans, wherever you want to call them, have traveled the world, and throughout time they've called us different things. They've called us Moors. No matter where they are, where in the world, they would call us Moors, or no matter where they are, they will call us Ethiopians, because
Mhm,
they usually gravitate towards people or
mhm.
melanated people who have, basically kicked their butts. And it's like there was a time right after the Haitian Revolution, after the Haitians kicked Napoleon's butt and was, doing all this stuff, they were calling all dark-skinned, melanated people Haitians. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? Because the whole point was that they were they were declaring a war on a group of people who were darker than them.
And
That
thought was monolithic. If you were dark, you were that.
Exactly. So I wanted to get to say this real quick, and then I wanted to get to my final. I wanted to ask you about something else based on your scholarship. Is that the reality is that people understands, like, when you're studying stuff like Christianity, Catholicism, voodoo, hoodoo, and all that, you have to understand it's a combination of the colonizer, what they brought over, via Christianity, with which is a result of the Nicaea Council, you know what I'm saying, and all this stuff that they took from, Egypt or Kemet in those creation stories with Isis, or Aset, you know, you got to just take your time. You got to understand, like, all this stuff is that we see in America. Really, that's why America is one of the most unique places in the world. It's because it's a combination of all these people. Now, are we going to be completely accurate? I don't think we're going to get to the answer to that question of, like, where did these people come from? Because, we've been so confused and so distracted by European geopolitical, boundaries. Like, what is Egypt now may not have, been the boundaries from Egypt 1,000, 2,000 years ago. The same for Saudi Arabia, the same for Mecca, the same for wherever you want to go in the world. You know what I'm saying? There's also a theory that all this was one landmass at one point.
It was.
There was a huge earthquake, and there was what they call plate tectonics and stuff to separate. I've seen graphics that show, the South America actually fitting perfectly into
It
West
all
Africa. Now,
together.
now I can't prove any of that stuff. I wasn't there. You
America, South America, and Africa fit together as one perfect puzzle because we were all one land. The pyramids are older in the Americas than they are in Africa.
That's what I wanted to get on, based on your history. I
Hmm.
mean, your history scholarship.
Hmm.
They keep talking about these pyramids that are here in the United States.
Hmm.
And I read some stuff that says it's true, then I read some stuff that hasn't, that refutes it. I think they say it's in the Grand Canyon.
Hmm.
Now, what is your research and your scholarship told you about that?
They are pyramids, but you have to know who's doing the refuting. You ain't finding no people of color that's refuting it, but you're gonna find unmelanated people who refute it because they don't want to give up a land that was ill-gotten because it would, to say they are what they are, they would have to um, deny that we were, here and here and thousands and thousands of years. You don't build a pyramid overnight,
Mhm.
and that's not just the only one. There are mounds.
Yeah, I've seen the mounds, but those are totally different than pyramids.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
the these effigy mounds, I mean, they're
Hmm.
burial
I've
sites.
read some stuff that there's actually like the actual monuments and the actual statues that you would see in ancient Kemet, or what we call Egypt, is actually in the Grand Canyon in some secret,
They're entryways, and then you have the oldest pyramid. Not yet. The oldest pyramid that's in Kemet is a step pyramid. That was created by Khufu. Um, but the pyramids that are older than that oldest pyramid are the ones that are in South America. They're all step pyramids. So we can agree that the oldest pyramids are step pyramids, and then they gradually became the pyramids that don't have steps. So we can agree that scholars can agree and have agreed that step pyramids are the first pyramids that were being built, and then they perfected their art. And so there's your timeline right there. And so it begs to ask many questions where, you know, we I don't argue that life began there in Alkebulan, but I do know that the migration, because those, the landmass was so close together that, you know, life being birthed there doesn't mean that they stayed there. Many were hunter gatherer and
right.
migrated all over. So they were migrating to other regions, and then they began to build these structures. And then those who came, they learned, because if you look at the Mayan calendar, look at the Kemet, the Egyptian calendar, it's the same calendar.
Yeah, I think you know what I think it is though, Peachy. I think a lot of people, they don't want to wrap their head around the concept
Hmm.
that the beginnings of this planet did not include white folks.
Well, I don't know why,
They
because
don't want to. They're like the youngest people
the
on the
babies of the
earth.
planet.
They're less than 10,000 years old.
Right. Well,
On a planet. Yes.
we have been here for millennia. And so if you're a mutated version of humanity, you're going to be the youngest thing, because a mutation isn't an origin, it's a mutation. I mean, to me, it's just not rocket science.
It really isn't.
It
It
is.
really isn't.
And so it's more a cognitive dissonance than it is, anything else. It's just being able to accept what is. But because you have been programmed for so long, it's so difficult for so many people to deny that program and to come away from a lie that you've been taught. K through 12 is not an education. It was never an education. It's still not an education. It's indoctrination.
Yes.
Don't teach you how to think, they teach you what to think. And so you can't, to be just educated in school is not to be educated. You're not. You have to teach your children at home, in addition to what they are being poured into in these educational because anything that's done
And you know what I call them? You know what I call them?
what
Seriously. I like to do, and some people think it's just I'm just being too poetic. It's the spoken word artist and rapper me. I look at the root and of every word and look how it's spelled. There's a reason why they're called concentration camps. I feel like the school system and I feel like schools are a concentration camp for the mind. It's to make you concentrate on something to keep you distracted from something else. And that's the reason why our discussion and our conversation and our dialogue today is so powerful when we're talking about them trying to get rid of CRT. They're actually weaponizing it and criminalizing it to the point where they're actually finding and wanting to put people in jail and making it an enforceable offense if you teach that white people have been benefiting from institutional racism since the time that they've colonized people. That's just ridiculous. And I'm like, you can't even teach the Constitution because the Constitution says I'm 3/5 of a human being.
Well, you got to understand the origin. Since you break words down, you got to understand the origin. Anything that's run by the system, the government. Govern means control, ment means mind. So it's all mind control. It's all about being able to remote control thinking. And they want to be able to control what you think about. They don't want you to have the ability to critically think about information on your own, because then you're going to stray away from the program. And so if you're teaching your children at home how to think about information and how to critically, decipher, to set to dissect, and to pull it apart till there's nothing left of it, you're not going to be a part of the status quo. And that's what you have to really press upon people, that don't just send your kids off for someone else to give them a government learning. Yeah, no, because then you're not parenting your children when you do that. You're not. And so you got to understand that everything has a white man. You can't send your kids to the white man and think they're doing them some good. You just can't.
I mean, people be like, "Do you think the education system is working?" I said, "Absolutely, it's working exactly how they wanted to do it."
Intended it to do.
You know what I'm saying? It's any. I have a hard time, and this is the reason why I'm in a system, to be there, because the most of our people are in that system, and I'm there to help them. Right. But any system where you had to force the people who are the children of the oppressor, to teach the kids who are the children of the enslaved, that's not a good makeup. Like integration was them forcing you to them getting forced to teach, a group of people they didn't want to teach. And like, I wouldn't even trust that. That's like sending a kid over to like your next door neighbor that you're beefing with. That, like, I want you to spend your summers with them. Like,
worse than that.
Yeah, it's worse than that.
Worse than Warden, that's like sending your kid to the jail and say, hold him while I work.
Well, right. Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's one way to look at it too. Hey, we've been on here for a minute. We're gonna have to do a part 2. I have to have you come back. You know what I'm saying? Great conversation. I really appreciate it. You coming on. I was really excited for this because we go back and forth so much, and I'm glad that we were able to come to a common ground. I think we did a good job today. In all seriousness, on C Talk, you weren't bullying me like you usually do, and I hope this was a form of intervention for you, that you've come to Jesus now. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's a good part of community building, because Black folks know how to agree with each other most of the time, but we don't know how to disagree. And there might be some things that we disagree with, but all in all, we know that we share a common enemy, and that's ignorance. And that we share a common, ground, that, we value education, and we value that desire to learn. And, I used to always tell people, I used to win a lot of debates, man, on the streets, man. I tell people all the time, I'm a 5%er, and people are like, well, you just don't remind me of, a 5%er, and you're different. Well, that's because I'm not the same 5%er that I used to be. I used to go around town and I used to win a lot of arguments, but they'd be like, man, Logic's an a-hole. You know what I'm saying? He's a jerk. And I probably was. I was always about winning the argument. Now it's about seeking understanding. And it's like, there's more than one way to look at it. And just because you don't see it like me, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm just going to be like, well, your vision is the way it is based on, what I'm saying, what you prescribe to. Someone's going to see something different with bifocals. A person who has 20/20 vision and they don't need glasses. So we just see in different vantage points allow you to see things differently. But the point is that we got to come to the realization that we got to learn how to love each other, and not try to be corny or anything, but understanding is love. And I used to tell people all the time who were Christian, be like, man, you got to be saved. You got to be, and I used to talk to the Muslims all the time. They'd be like, oh man, that's haram. That's this, that, and the third. And I'd be like, when you're on the side of the road and your car's broke down and I pull in front of you, put my hazards on to help you, the first thing to come out of your mouth is, hey man, before you help me fix this tire, I need to know, are you saved?
Come on.
I need to know, are you a Muslim? Do you pray 5 times a day? Do you eat pork? Man, you don't care nothing about what, man, do you have jumper cables?
That part.
You know what I'm saying? So when we talk about the plan of action, that's my plan of action. My plan of action, my homework is to just try to seek to understand people, see their point of view, just be like, I don't agree with that. But you know what? I understand where you're coming from. I understand why you see it the way you are, unless they talk about something just really egregious. What would you think will be your plan of action based on what we talked about today? If you keep it 100.
My plan of action is going to be continue to research and do more to promote the awareness of we some original people of the land.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I've been all over the world, from China to Africa to Haiti to Jamaica to, all over, even Canada, Mexico, all over. And that's what I look for. I look for people that look like me. And everywhere I go, I find out that we are the foundation.
We are the foundation of this.
We are the foundation. Would you got to understand, they are the pictures they put on the front of pamphlets. They are the real pictures of the people who live in rural areas or, somewhere. And they're usually darker.
Yep, back up in the cut where don't nobody see, nobody go. That's the real of wherever you go.
Okay. Real quick, if you want a t-shirt like this, you got to hit up Tiffany Wilson. You can inbox me if you want to get that. Any of the t-shirts I wear are usually from local people, including myself. I wear a griot t-shirt. I wear a Feel, Heal, Build, and Grow t-shirt. I wear a Militant Intellectual. All those t-shirts are available. You just got to inbox me, or and I can send you in the right direction. Make sure you donate, to our time when it's up. If Peachy feels comfortable, she can put her Cash App up there, but always donate, if you can, Venmo, and then comment. Make sure you comment and make sure you share this video, engage with us, and then join us, join us. If you want to be a guest on this show, let me know. I'll let you be on here. If you want to talk about the secrets of being a master at hula hoop, we got room for that too. All right. We out. It's been Speak On It. It's been Peachy Scott.